Mufa.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of things happen in the country, and so many things to touch on. We're just going to be touching on the good and the bad side of what's happening in the country, man. But let's just
More bad than good we see these days.
exactly, that's what I'm saying. But let's at least give our condolences to the 12 people who passed away in the shooting that occurred in Cleveland, I believe, in Johannesburg. In a mass shooting, I think it was revolving around illegal gold mining and things of that nature. So, what are your thoughts on this, basically?
I believe all these social problems that we're experiencing in the country, they all stem from very few causes. All these social problems, the mass shooting, the crime, and everything else. I think unemployment has a lot to do with that. Unemployment, the poverty rate in this country as well. Because if you could follow the story on the mass shooting that recently happened in Cleveland, you will learn that it is related to illegal gold mining. And illegal gold mining, it is an avenue for, making money. It is a form of employment for other people. So these are some of the problems that are actually caused by unemployment. You see, all these 80, the 80-20 rules, it's applicable in most of life situations that we can see. So all these, about 80% of our problems, they come from 20% of causes. And if you look at the xenophobic attacks, the shootings that also happen, the GDP, the crime rates, the corruption, and the everything, a few problems are to be blamed for that. And there is a few causes are to be blamed for that. And there is unemployment, there is poverty. The people are hungry, people need to make money, people need to eat, people need to have their basic needs met. And if they cannot, some of these people, they resort to doing crime.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. And especially regarding unemployment, man. Because we see what's happening out towards now. People are going to illegal jobs. That's what I'm saying, just to make a decent living. Because now, when they try doing the right way and following the system, it's in a way that people feel as if the system betrays them. Because there's a lot of people who actually do the right thing, follow the law, get a better education, get certification, try and improve themselves, but then they still end up being amongst the 35% who are unemployed, which is very unfortunate, and that can lead to people feeling hopeless, desperate, and it's always emotions like that that lead to people leaning into very extreme behavior. You understand what I'm saying? And the unfortunate part is the fact that also it leads to, I guess, businesses also having the edge over people, because now, in a way, since businesses know that people are desperate for jobs, they start underpaying, or you even see scenarios like this where now people are getting shot and killed. Towards now you have innocent people. You have 12 lives that were probably feeding homes, probably feeding mouths at home, which are now taken. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that when you read the stuff on the news, we'll just see that about like 12 people passed away.
But we don't really understand
the
effect, and then also the human element that's behind that, because it is not just 12 people. Some of those people are parents, some of those people are children, some of those people, their uncles and their brothers, who are actually playing a role in their families, playing a role within their communities, within their societies. So it really hurts me as an African to see the status quo of how South Africa has become in these days. And it hurts me that how did it come to this? When did we get to people just arriving at a residential area and then just start shooting people around? This is something that was unheard of while I was growing. And then now that I'm a man, I realize that there's just so many social problems, so many social ills that this country is facing. And then you also remember these mass shootings, they sometimes do occur in drinking places, in bars, in taverns. There have been a couple of locations around South Africa where gunmen just stormed inside an entertainment venue where people were just relaxing, having their drinks, having a great time, and then started shooting and killing people around. So all these occurrences, these tragic events, when they happen, they really make us question who we are. We really need to sit down and ask ourselves who we are. When did we get to this? How come you are able to have the conscience that you're actually going to go out there and then just randomly kill people who don't know anything and kill people who didn't even do anything to you. When did we get to this? How did we come to this?
Yeah, man, it's a thing we said, man. Like you said, man, this is not just caused by one thing, and it's also not caused by everything. It's just caused by that small 20% of causes that's leading to 80% of the damage. You understand what I mean? And it's very unfortunate, man. But another thing that I also like to touch on is how I think also regarding the xenophobia attacks, I think they're also kind of in a way getting out of hand. You understand what I mean? I understand that South Africans are frustrated about illegal immigrants, the high unemployment, the high crime, and things of that nature. But I think that it's very flawed to think that it's only
Every South
immigrants.
African.
Exactly, every South African, and also it's just immigrants who are causing this. Whereas we still know that a huge fraction of the things happening are caused by both groups. You understand what I'm saying? It's not necessarily that we should be pointing the finger at anyone when really guilty. We should actually be pointing the finger at actually the ones above. You understand what I'm saying? Because they're the ones who are actually managing everything. You understand what I'm saying? And dictating how things should be ran. So I sometimes think that I guess when people end up getting desperate, they tend to look for a finger to point at. Because I think that this is my observation. I assume that, let's say this whole thing does work, of them getting rid of immigrants and stuff like that. I think that when people realize that the problems have got still exactly the same, they're just gonna move the goalpost again. Then they're gonna start blaming a different person. Exactly. When you look at all of South Africa's economic problems, there's always someone being blamed. Including all of them. It's always this person's doing this person's doing that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Totally
The white people did this. ANC, immigrants, and they may not be completely wrong. But I still think that that's what's always going to happen. The goalpost is always going to be shifted because of the fact that these things cannot be solved by just you changing one thing.
I strongly agree with you, because one thing that I've observed in South Africa is that sometimes we tend to attribute problems we have to the wrong causes. We actually need to be perfectly honest with ourselves and determine the causes of the problems that we are having. Unemployment, we cannot attribute that to illegal immigration. Why? Because there is a huge inequality gap in South Africa among South Africans. There are South Africans who are amassing wealth, amassing entrepreneur deals of about billions of rands, and imagine how many families could actually benefit from such amounts of money, but then only to find they are going to a single family, they are only going to one individual. So we also need to consider all the iniquities in our society, also need to consider all the corruption amongst our leaders, so that we do not attribute the problems to the wrong causes. And let's also put it out there to the international community. As we are creating this podcast, we are in South Africa, and things, they are not as bad as they are portrayed in the media, because I'm in the media space, and one thing I can tell you about media is that it represents reality, it represents the world. And one thing about media and Africa is that the media always had a tendency of misrepresenting Africa. Before we came to this a couple of years ago, going back a couple of decades, Africa was always represented as this, it's a poor country, they are, disease-ridden country, it's an animal-running country. So all these representations of the media of Africa, they are incorrect. And even today, the same mindset still continues. The media still portrays South Africa as, hey, it is a very violent country. When you are walking around, you can just get attacked, or you can be asked about your nationality or something like that. It really isn't the case. Although these things are happening, but it really isn't the case. Because look at us now. We are able to educate, we are able to inform, we are able to be productive, ordinary, not that we are under any threat right now. I'd be lying if I'd say we are. So in as much as we're talking about all these violent attacks, in as much as we're talking about, mass shootings, xenophobia, attacks and everything like that, we are not deterring tourists from visiting South Africa. It's a very, very beautiful country, by the way, and we do encourage them that they should just come and bask into our Ubuntu. And when I talk about Ubuntu, that is a philosophy, that is a mindset that we need to restore among our people, and especially going to the mass shootings that we were talking about. Because we have raised a nation, we've raised a society that doesn't feel any compassion for another human being. That's why it's so easy for people just to get outside, stand in the street, and start spraying bullets at everybody that comes around. And then we have stopped talking about philosophies that actually matter. We'll stop talking about philosophies that make us who we are. So up until we remind ourselves of who we are, up until we reinstill these teachings among our people, among our children, I'm afraid some of our problems and their causes, they are not about to go away.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be here to remain, exactly. And I think that one of the worst parts about this is the fact that obviously blood is being shed. And I think the sad part about, I think what's worse about blood, I think what's more worse than blood being shed is people being happy that blood is being shed. Because, I've been seeing a lot of videos on the internet about, a lot of protesters, like, basically burning shops of immigrants' establishments, kicking them out of where they stay and things of that nature. And I'm not a big advocate of vigilante. People try to take the law into their own hands. I don't agree with that because obviously I think that when the public tries to take the law into their own hands, they're kind of looking more out for themselves than they're actually looking for actual justice in and of its own. That's why even sometimes they'll even torture the people that they're quote unquote trying to get justice for. You understand what I'm saying? Or, they'll harm people to the point where they're not supposed to, and then people actually will be happy that someone was killed, an immigrant was killed, or these people were killed, and things of that nature. Which is, I think, is something that's, I think that just leads to a dying nation.
Oh yes,
because then I understand that yes, we're not happy with what's happening around us, but we should still always have that human element. We should have that ubuntu to know what. Even though someone else is wrong,
you cannot do this.
You can't be happy that someone else
it's so
died.
easy to kill someone else.
Exactly. You understand what I'm saying? But yeah, man, but I think we're touching a lot of the negative news, man.
But here's the thing again. As I was saying, that we are not trying to frighten people about South Africa. It is a very great country, and we also need to celebrate the fact that there has been a decline in the South African meta rate. There is like a 9.5% decline from the previous years in our meta rate, but still it is alarming to see that between January and March, there's been about 5,181 murders in South Africa alone. So this translates to 58 killings every single day. So it is too many people. It is too much blood being shed when we have rates that maintain that there are 58 people who are being killed on a daily basis in South Africa. So it shouldn't be so easy to take someone's life, and it shouldn't be so easy to mislead ourselves and misinform one another to the point that we end up harboring resentment or hatred for other nationalities or for other tribes or for other races. And as you have rightfully put it, we can get rid of the illegal immigration problem in South Africa, but we're still going to be having another problem. And then to what causes are we going to attribute those? You see, after fighting other Africans because they're from other countries, now we're going to end up fighting one another because we'll be like, wena iten ke Free State mona, wena umzulu rutlela Natal, hayi wena nguse Natal la, wena umsuthu buyela ebasuthwini. Izogcina seyiye lapho ngenxa yani, ngenxa yokuthi asifuni ukuthi sithembeke kuri re kgone gore re utlwisise gore mathata a rona a bakelwa keng. No ga go batle gore re shebe mathata a rona ka tshepagala. Ntho e re batlang, re batla solution e tla bang fast for mathata a rona gore re supe menwana re re nyine nkinga ngenxa ya lona nyine nkinga ngenxa ya lona and one big thing about pointing fingers at someone else uthi ngibona yibo labantu abaletha inkinga is what you don't realize the other three fingers are pointing at you. It means you are also just a part of that problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I think, dude, like, I think it's gotten so bad to the point where it's kind of like, basically all of Africa has turned their backs on us. Because it also feels as if we've also turned their backs on them. Because even regarding South Africa's game against Mexico, the opening match of the World Cup, yes, there was like almost every African nation was supporting Mexico. It was kind of like back in basically the apartheid times again. When black South Africans used to support the All Blacks whenever they played against
instead of supporting the South African
exactly because of the apartheid government through the nation. It's basically the same thing all over again. Towards now, all of Africa feels as if South Africa has basically turned their backs on everyone. We're kind of even seen as terrorists now, or murderers. Because I was even scrolling on Twitter the other day, and I believe I was seeing these other tweets like getting like hundreds of thousands of likes of basically people saying, "Wow, you guys aren't supporting South Africa." Even though we all used to be Africa back in 2010 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then someone commented, "Hi, South Africans might say that now we're taking their jobs while we're supporting them." You know what I'm saying? So, dude, like it's really getting out of hand, man. I think that as a continent, we're getting very separated. You know what I'm saying? And
I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because I'm just mocking the status quo and the mindset behind that.
Exactly. So yeah, man. So right now, South Africa's not really looking so good, man, in the eyes of our African brothers and sisters. We kind of look like the bad guy right now. We look like the bad guy right now.
And in the global village at large, even other countries out of the African continent, they are just as shocked that how could you treat your own brothers, your fellow African men, the way that you treat them. But anyway, we saw it, play out last night in the soccer game. I must say I was a little bit disturbed with how our country performed. But as you're saying, the whole global village is supporting Mexico and not supporting South Africa. No wonder why they had that power. They had the great performance more than we did. But I believe also as South Africa we have our own problems. We have our own problems, and we are a cause to some of our problems. And especially looking at how the national team performed last night, I couldn't believe it was an entire national team that was playing that game. To me, it occurred as if even if we would have taken some of the local teams and then have them play against Mexico at an international level, they would have done far, far better than the national team. I'm telling you, if we were taking Sundowns, if it was just the Sundown squad playing against Mexico, I'm sure we're gonna come out with a win. I'm sure it's gonna come. I'm not saying that because I'm in Pretoria and I'm supporting Sundowns. No, but that's the truth. I've never seen such a poor performance. And the performance of Bafana, as I just mentioned earlier on, it indicates the problems that we have and the fact that we are the cause of our problems as a country. So even when the coach came to give comments at the end of the game, to me, he didn't show any emotion. To me, he didn't show any shock of the team's performance. So that illustrates to me that there is more than what meets the eye. So what we saw in the game yesterday, it is actually what we see when the curtains are open, but there is more behind the curtains. Labantu bayalwana. There is too much political interference, and there's a lot of disagreement and not being united, in the leadership of the Bafana of sports here in South Africa. That is what I saw when I looked into the eyes of the coach yesterday. I was like, but this coach, he looks like he was expecting this kind of a result. And this coach looks also not only disappointed, but defeated by everything that's going on around, even besides the game of soccer or even his responsibility as a coach. Because I still believe Bafana could have played much better than that.
Exactly. And dude, like it was so much the point where some of the European journalists were even saying that this guy number 20 Saka is not a professional footballer. He has to be contained.
Who is playing number 20 anyway? Aksum down.
Wasn't it Siton? I feel like
Oh, it was. Oh, wasn't it one of the guys who got it? I never seen a game with so many red cards. I've never seen it.
exactly. So that was better. I think that performance was just some other reflection was happening in the country. Yeah,
Sure.
we're really
Sure. And the causes, it's not what we say are actually causing all these problems. We are the real cause of these things. Because I'm telling you, I never seen a team making so many fouls right from the beginning. It's like we were playing with an angry spirit or something else. There were just too many fouls that I could identify throughout the game. And I was thinking, no man, our boys could have played this very much better. And surprising enough, man, I'm not much of a soccer fan and I'm not a soccer commentator. But what I noticed yesterday is the captain of the Bafana team was actually a goalkeeper. What does it say about the team if we have a goalkeeper as a captain? Instead of a player that is actually running the entire ground. I give it up for him. I have a lot of respect. I have a lot of love for Williams. So, but with no observation, how could Bafana try to improve, in the next coming games? Because here's the thing. Here's the thing. What I noticed at the beginning of the game is there was a little bit of fear amongst our team members, and then at the same time, they were not too intentional, in terms of moving forward, conceding goals and actually scoring. So with that, I feel when Mexico scored the first goal, that actually put them under pressure. But one thing I need to remind viewers and everybody is that there's this thing that you ride until the wheels fall off. You ride till the wheels fall off. I mean, for whatever the situation you might find yourself, it really is about not giving up and then just continuing. And the continuation, it really is about being hopeful. So even in the midst of losing, even in the midst of the opponent doing much better than you, I think just having that hopeful mindset, it can take us through not only a soccer game, but then through life in general, that we're always hopeful. Despite all the negative news stories that are circulating about South Africa, we are not a very bad country. Our borders are open, and we hope everyone would actually consider visiting South Africa. The mass shootings, the xenophobic attacks is not something that it happens commonly to every citizen. That we are even fearful of going outside or going anywhere because we are Africa as we are now, and it's not like we have any fear of terrorism, bombs exploding and attacking us when we are doing our show. No, it's not that way, and it's also not like we're going to have people just barge in on us and start spraying bullets for no reason. It really isn't like that. As I said earlier on about news and representation. Sometimes news they like representing the bad news stories. Controversy always gets attention. So it's not as bad as it might be made out to be. It really isn't as bad. Am I wrong?
no, you're not wrong. And our next point is actually gonna at least instill some hope.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think
Oh, yeah.
South Africa's economy is showing signs of growth. Our GDP has grown by 0.5%.
Finally.
Compared to the last quarter. Compared to last year's quarter around the same time. The first quarter of the year. So this year our GDP grew by 0.5% relative to the first quarter of 2025.
I believe it grew around 0.2% in the last year. It was growth that was close to
0.2%.
nothing actually.
Exactly. Whereas then this year, at least the one a bit of an uptrend, whereas at least this year, the previous quarter showed us a 0.5% growth, which is magnificent.
That's something positive.
A lot of people
are positive news
exactly.
on the other side.
A lot of people may think that that's not really that significant, but it may in a way it represents some level of hope. You know,
Because
it
I was
represents the
about
start
to
of
ask you,
growth of
if
a
the
dream.
GDP grows with 0.5%, and then how does that affect me? What does it say to me? Because the price of bread is still expensive, and the fuel price is not going low. So I'm still feeling the heat of a poor economy as they stand.
I mean, yeah, true. I mean, 0.5% growth is not really that impressive, but it's
Oh,
still
yeah.
some level of growth. And obviously, it may not be that drastic, but it does show a small amount of improvement. And you know, GDP growth usually leads to more business activity, you know, which means that our businesses are actually pouring more money into the economy, and consumers are also getting more involved in the economy due to their nature. And and something else that actually pairs well with this is the fact that you know, South African banks are starting to actually even invest more in medium-sized businesses. You know, they actually are lending medium-sized businesses more money at lower interest rates. They're even providing, I guess, funding. You know, somewhat you could say, I don't want to say tenders because they're not necessarily what's being used. But like banks are actually coming up with agreements, like major banks, you know, FNB, Standard Bank, ABSA, they're all coming up with
to
agreements with
contribute to
medium
the growth
businesses.
of SMEs.
Exactly. Which shows that they probably see something that we don't. You know, because they also have a lot of researchers and data scientists and data researchers who basically go through everything and decide whether or not South Africa is actually a good enough landscape to invest in. And if the banks are investing in it and they have way more knowledge than we do, they probably see something we don't. Exactly, they see some potential. They see that South Africa's economy can actually grow. And funny enough, I think that despite the fact that you know we've experienced so much, you know, corruption, mismanagement of funds, stuff like that, South Africa is still. I believe it's still Africa's biggest economy, if I'm not correct. I think we still also have the highest GDP per capita and the highest nominal GDP, if I'm not correct. So the fact that we've still been able to remain, I guess, the big dog in Africa, despite all adversity, shows that we actually have a lot of potential. You know, and I think that war is the only one's holding ourselves back.
We are our only threat.
Exactly.
Yes. And as I was saying earlier on about the media and representation, that such good news is something that we don't come into contact with on a daily basis. On a daily basis, we're being fed all these negative news stories. We've been fed all these tragic stories. And earlier on in earlier episodes, we spoke about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, about how African countries need to be integrated in, you know, creating opportunities for trade, need to be integrated to also enable lower tariff lower tariff rates when we're trading with other African countries. So all these positive news, it is something that we don't get to hear on a regular basis. And now with South Africa's GDP strengthening as it does, and if there was more mobilization around the integration of Africa through programs such as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, do you see that in that way would be unlocking the potential that is held inside the African continent? Because we possess a lot of potential regardless of everything. But now representation, the media, and a few corrupt political leaders, they want us to actually fight against each other. But there's so much potential in South Africa and in Africa at large.
Yeah, exactly. And what's your overall outlook of South Africa in the next 10 years? Because, you know, despite the fact that things look extremely bad now, I do think that with just minor improvements and minor changes, I do think that the next 10 years are looking pretty good. I think right now South African employment rate is at an all-time high, I believe. But I think that within the next 10 years, it should be going down, especially looking at economic indicators like how, you know, businesses are investing into medium-sized businesses. I mean, banks are investing into medium-sized businesses, and also our GDP growth. Our GDP is growing, and we're still the largest economy in South Africa, you know. And I do also think that AI is also going to help us in a way of generating more jobs. You know, it may automate certain tasks, but then it's also going to I guess, shift the sentiment into other areas that we need people to focus on, things like that. And I do think the celebration is a bright future, especially also with our stars also going international. You understand what I'm saying? So despite the fact that, you know, you have artists like, you know, Buma Kore, some of them, and Tyler going international.
Trevor Noah.
Exactly. At least, well, let me exclude Trevor Noah there. Because at least
Why wouldn't you want to squeeze
they
it in
haven't
there?
left the country.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
they're still here. You know, you still see them here in South Africa. You know, stuff like that. They're still, you know, hosting shows here and still, you know, entertaining the fans here. You know, maintaining a good balance. Well, the reason why they include Taiwan was because he's just maybe the USA. This is South Africa at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So in the next 10 years, the future of South Africa is bright, in my perspective, in my view. But however, there has to be a few transformations, changes that are going to happen in different aspects of our society. First, starting with the education system. The education system needs a very strong makeover. The education system also needs to be updated in a major way. So the education system needs to be relooked and then reinvested to ensure that we are training young people, we're training students that are going to leave matric, you know, with certain skills that they be able to contribute and become active citizens in the country. So we need to relook at the education system. And then secondly, also just looking at our political makeover, because the current political climate is letting this country down. The current political climate is holding us back. So we also need to look into re-educating our leaders on what's actually important to take a nation forward. Because I feel now we have leaders that are more concerned about the number of cars that they own. You know, they are more concerned about self-enrichment, and they are more concerned about their bank balances than they're actually concerned about the well-being of society. So we also need a makeover in the leadership and in the minds of our leaders, not to be consumed by materialism and consumerism, because all these things is what creates corruption in our country. That people want to have more than they are actually worthy, or they want to obtain more than what they have merit. So, yeah.
Yeah,
The future looks positive.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, as I saw another guy the other day tweeted where he said, you can still be rich and also still help the country.
Yes,
yes. Like,
it
especially
don't
with
mean
someone
you
in
have to steal
power.
from the country in order for you to
Exactly.
become
You
rich.
understand what I mean?
Yes.
So, yeah.
And it don't mean you have to go around be killing other people in order for you not to have business competition. No.
Exactly. You know, it's all about innovation. You understand what I mean? And that's why also the USA is also always innovating. Because they don't kill each other. You get what I mean? They're always just trying to innovate and get better than next competition.
They uplift each other. Exactly. It really is about upliftment.
Exactly. Or sometimes they even collaborate. You know, you sometimes even see Google collaborate with, you know, Microsoft or even Google and Apple, despite being competitors, also still collaborate.
The collaboration.
Yes,